Dave's Podcast, Episode 17. First of all, I'd like to thank Susie Cornish for that brilliant introduction. Dave's Podcast, Episode 17. Fish and Away. Kitchens Direct. Selling Doors. And it's just not adding up. Once Pat moved in with us, we were in a period of adjustment. When anyone moves in with you, even if it's a family member, now be honest now, after a while things start to annoy you. But this was a relative stranger who needed lots of support and guidance to adjust to her new life. I won't be going on into details about Pat herself for confidentiality reasons, but I'm only going to cover how it affected us. We were now getting paid a reasonable amount of money to look after Pat within the shared life scheme. This gave Deb the opportunity to drop the agency work. She started working 4 days a week at Stepping Stones, with Thursdays off, as that coincided with the day Pat wasn't going to day service. This also eased the pressure on me as the sole breadwinner. I had been going for 10 years and things had changed. Some of my original good customers, had simply died. They had retired when I was started calling. It was always sad when I lost an old customer. It was often the husband who was the one that liked the fish and would choose it and do the cooking. So often the widow left behind would no longer have me call. It was always sad to suddenly drive past a house I had called on for many years. Maybe a new family would move in, but it was unlikely they were fish lovers or even around in the day. I remember once coming back after the Christmas break, and during that time 3 of my old customers had died. Some were not discovered for days, and I may well have been the last person they ever spoke to. No one really wants the last words on earth to be, "Your normal pair of kippers, Mrs. Jones." David's high-quality fresh fish was never going to be franchised. On a wet, freezing Friday night, no one else was going to call on Mrs. Smith and deliver her kippers. Years later, we had a chap call on us in Wales. I was amazed that his van was the exact setup and layout that I had on my van. But he was employed by a butcher shop an hour and a half away. He called on us a few times, but he must have missed us and obviously made no effort to call again. My dissolution came to a head at my last Christmas. I always looked to make enough sales to cover having a week off at Christmas. Now this did depend a lot on the day that Christmas fell. Ideally, you would want it to be at a weekend. People would then order whole salmon, sides of smoked salmon and prawns. But if it was a Monday or a Tuesday, there was a bigger gap to keep anything fresh. On my last Christmas week, it was very disappointing. Not much more than a normal busy day. My van had only £1,000 left to be paid off. I was in a position to walk away. I remember telling Deb I had had enough of the early mornings, the cold, the wet, the constant worry and the stress. I had fallen out of love with fish. I couldn't face the smell anymore. When I finally finished, it took me years before I could even eat fish again. But I was proud of my accomplishments. I had run a business for 12 years. It had paid the mortgage and all the bills. We had moved to a bigger house. My girls didn't want for nothing. Okay, we didn't have fancy holidays. They were just starting secondary school. I think it was my biggest achievement in life and my most enjoyable time. But now our shared lives work was well established and we were known within the Reading group. We had attended barbecues to meet other people in the scheme. Debbie was settled into a 9-to-5 work at Stepping Stones day service. So driven by this disillusionment, and aided by our new financial security, I informed our customers in spring 1999 that this was my last week. Now, I made a crazy decision. I saw an advert in the Reading Chronicle for kitchen designer and salesman. It was only commission payment. I don't know what I was thinking, but I soon realised the company drew people in, sold them the idea with no investment. So I went for an interview at Kitchens Direct. They were situated in the Tessa Road Reading, above the Co-op. I met the manager, and he sold me the job. "Oh, you can pick your own hours. I've just come back from a skiing holiday." He was all flash watches and jewellery, so I was totally sold, and I was about to make my fortune. So I arrived on a Monday, all suited, with a tie, and with a brand new briefcase I had brought. The room was full of 20 people who had brought into the sales pitch. We had a week of training before we were inflicted on the unsuspected kitchen buyer. Although I always told customers I had been working for the company for many years. I mean, no one wants to hear, oh, actually, you're my first kitchen design. What can possibly go wrong? What do you mean I've missed the sink out? Oh, well, do you really need one? I've given you a new dishwasher. Anything else can go in the bath. I better give you a bit of the layout of the office and how the business model worked. Business model? You've changed, Dave. You entered through a door and up a staircase. There was no sign or advertisement because there was no kitchens on show. In fact, none of our kitchens were within 100 miles of this office. The workshop and the central office were based in Birmingham. When you got up these steps, through a door, on the left-hand side was a call centre. Here, around 10 ladies cold called members of the public, attempting to get appointments for us, the kitchen designer and the salesman. This was before regulation was brought in to restrict who you could call. Eventually, the internet would kill off this kind of sales. The ladies worked from 10 till 12, 2 till 4, and then 6 till 8. The premise being that 10 till 12 was after the morning school run, and then in the evening that was after tea, and 8 o'clock, anything after 8 o'clock would be a bit late. I mean, when you get a phone call after 9, you always think, oh shit, who's died now? You must remember, mobile phones were still very basic. They could merely make phone calls. I know, I can hear some heads exploding from here. If you were lucky, you could change the phone buttons. You had a choice of 4 primary colours. Anyway, back to the call centre office. I was only shown around once before anyone had arrived. It was a very secretive room with desks set out and a white board. Here was a chart which marked the progress of the appointments. A call girl, oh, no, that's not right. One of the girls who made appointments would start on a Monday morning. Now, she started on £5 an hour. If she made an appointment, her hourly rate would increase for the whole week. So she would get £2 for one appointment, and then if she made 2 appointments, another £2. This would accumulate up to £15 an hour. Now, one girl regularly made 3 or 4 appointments on the Monday, making her on the higher rate for the rest of the week. I don't know how she achieved this, but she was the golden girl. It was a good job that suited young mums. They could drop the kids off at school, collect them at the right time, and then when their partner came home, they could leave and do the 6 till 8 shift. Back to the office layout. There was then a large office with a couple of desks. Here the manager, flash bloke with watches and rings, I'm going to call him Del Boy, but not so funny, and the assistant manager sat. Their job was to confirm the appointments which they received written on cards from the call centre office. They would always try and ascertain that both the husband and wife would be at the design appointment. It was no good doing a wonderful plan for hours and hours, giving them a price, for someone to say, well, that's lovely, I'll talk to my husband. Because really, you never heard from them again. Next to this office area was a conference room, and it was here I assembled on the Monday morning with my other victims. Most would not last the week, and everyone was gone after I was still going a month later. We were told the setup of the business. The factory was based in Birmingham, and here they would build our kitchens to the exact measurements and specifications of our design. So we had to learn how to measure and transfer that to a sheet of graph paper. So we designed a kitchen to fit the conference room. Sink by the window to give the husband a view while he was washing up. Leave sufficient gap around the oven. We had various brochures showing the kitchen styles that we could produce, and we were also given cupboard doors. We had to practice holding these up and building a dream kitchen while holding up a wobbly kitchen door. As the week went on, the numbers in the conference room dwindled. Each morning the manager carried on, never acknowledging or addressing this. I came to know that this was the norm. The people there weren't getting paid and hadn't signed a contract, as each one decided that maybe this wasn't for them. By the middle of the week we learned that we would be sent with a couple of hours' notice into someone's home, with the sole purpose of coming away 4 or 5 hours later with an order for many thousands of pounds. We would get 10% commission. We would need to sell at least 2 kitchens a week to make a reasonable wage. We could be sent to London, Milton Keynes, Swindon, Chester, with all the petrol and vehicle running costs covered by you. I did say I was mad to take this job. There were no sales targets as such. But if you didn't sell, you couldn't financially sustain driving around the south of England indefinitely. Also, if you've got a really good appointment, someone sitting there with a suitcase of money and an empty room, Del Boy, but not so funny, was going to send his best salesperson with the best possible chance of earning him his cut, and so financing his next lump of gold jewellery, and as I learnt later, pay maintenance to his various ex-wives. By Friday, we were all fully trained kitchen designers/salesmen. At lunchtime, we were taken out for Chinese by Del Boy, but not so funny. When I say all of us, there were only 4 of us left. We all crammed into his scruffy 10-year-old Rover that stank of smoke and beer cans. Not the kind of car that screamed success. So we sat for an hour and listened to Del Boy tell us about his holidays and his amazing Christmas do's at Kitchen Direct headquarters in Birmingham, with all the hotel and free drinks. I then went to assist Del Boy up at the bar. He told me to act cool. I looked around and I never saw him again.
3, all right? Play it nice and cool, son. Nice and cool, you know what I mean?
So I went home and waited for a phone call. On Saturday morning around 9, I was told to make my way to an address on the A4 in Twyford, just this side of Slough. Now, Reading were at home and playing at 3 p.m, so my plan was to sell a kitchen, jump on the M4 and get to the match before kick-off. You were always given as much information as they had, but it wasn't very much. So I arrived in Twyford on a Saturday morning. I come in and introduce myself. Yes, Kitchen Direct. I've been with them a couple of years now. What a great company to work for. They've just done my kitchen. It's lovely, you know. Such a stress-free job. Oh, it turns out salesmen lie. I know, the world is a terrible place. I was met by a lady, and I'm going to call her Hyacinth's Bucket. Her husband was not very interested and stayed in the lounge reading the paper, which could have been a problem. Anyway, I started talking to Hyacinth's Bucket. I was telling her, now, I'm really actually quite a nice person, and I always thought in the various sales jobs I did in the next few years, I could just be myself, tell a few jokes, and 'cause people always like a Dave, they would hand over thousands of pounds, and that would be it. But it turns out you have to have a killer edge, and you have to actually ask them for the sale. Anyway, I've been here for 4 hours. Hyacinth's Bucket and I have designed a beautiful kitchen, Shaker style with brushed aluminium handles. I don't know, I have no idea. I've drunk coffee, eaten a wonderful selection of biscuits and homemade cakes. I told Hyacinth's Bucket I'm off to football with my dear old dad. She knows I have 2 delightful girls. I've probably shown her photos from my wallet. So it comes down to the price. Now, we were told to add £1,000 onto your final total and then discard a bit off of that. So I get to 6 grand. She approaches Stan, her husband, still in the lounge. David's got this price, it's £6,000. Oh, well that's a bit more than we discussed. Oh, okay, 5,500. So I just knocked £500 off the price. Oh, well, okay, 5,000. Right, that's lovely, said Hyacinth's Bucket. Whoa, hang on there. He's just knocked £1,000 off the price. Oh, shut up, Stan. David's got a football match to get to. So the worst thing happened. I sold a kitchen on my very first day. I thought, well, this is easy. I left at around just after 2 o'clock for the hour trip down the M4 to get to the Madstad Stadium for Reading's home game. It was going to be tight, but I had a substantial deposit and had earned £500 in commission. Then an announcement came on the radio. Due to traffic congestion, the kick-off for today's match will be delayed by 15 minutes. I thought, blimey, life just doesn't get better than this. I can't remember if we won, but I'm sure we did. It was a perfect day. On the Monday, I arrived for our weekly sales meeting at 10 o'clock. We were now down to just 2 of the original intake. There was a lot of well done, David, and back-patting. They took my bank details for my payment at the end of the month. Oh, just one thing. You'll be docked £300 for your door samples. But it's just a deposit. You'll get it back if ever you leave. So I became a kitchen salesman, driving the south of England, waiting at an hour's notice. I would start to get nervous around 5 p.m, waiting for my phone call to go. Then ring, ring. OK, Dave, you're off to the Wembley area of London. Single mum in a small terrace house. Now, there was no sat-nav on your phone. I had to use an A to Z of London, which is kind of like Google Maps, but in book terms, and without the dodgy reviews. The A to Z book was an A5 size, and it didn't take long for you to drive onto the next page and utter confusion. I highlighted the street or road with yellow blobs, but soon my book was covered in yellow highlighted blobs. And this only gave me the street. I still needed to find the house number. I could pick the days I wanted to work, but most people wanted you to call at a weekend. If you had an evening call and you ended up did not arrive until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, it was well past 10 o'clock before you reached the all-important price. You couldn't rush this. I couldn't just walk in and go, This is going to cost you £5,000, because I hadn't sold them the dream of a gleaming new kitchen. It was a crazy time, not entirely stress-free, but it was also an amazing experience, going into someone's home and 4 hours later coming away with an order. My second kitchen was in London. It was a terrace house. The kitchen was a long galley kitchen. There was very little excitement and innovation I could put into my design. I couldn't stick an island unit in the middle of this kitchen. You'd have to go out through one door, run up the hall, and into the next section of the kitchen. But it was also on finance, which was interest-free. Well, kind of, if you paid it off in the allotted time. So this sale I earned £600 on, but this was really the exception. I then had a weekend off, as my dad had his 70th birthday due. I was also still attending the mighty Royals, who were on the march culminating in Premiership football in 2005. If you weren't picking up the appointments, you dropped down the pecking order, and you didn't get such good calls. I did have another good sale in London off Wimbledon Common. I arrived on a Sunday mid-morning to a young couple who had just had a baby, literally a few hours before. No, I'm kidding. I was in the kitchen, but this was due to be rebuilt in some kind of extension. It was all very complicated. The husband was flitting in and out, gazing over my shoulder and tutting, and then leaving the room again. I wasn't at all hopeful. The baby started crying. Do you mind if I feed? No, not at all. So now I'm measuring imaginary walls, trying to concentrate, with the husband wandering through and a young wife with no top on. But she was lovely, and we worked really hard on the design. She was focused and totally invested in the process. Right, she said at the end. What do we do to make this a reality? Well, I need a 10% deposit. I can't remember the figure, but it must have been about £7,000 worth. OK, Rodney? The husband came in and looked at the plans. Is this it then? Are you happy, Cassandra? Yes. The wife then left the room to change the baby. I don't know why, because it was a perfectly lovely baby. No, I mean to change its nappy. Rodney then produced a wallet and tipped 10 credit cards onto the table. He began sorting through them. Try this one. No, I remember now. I bought a new set of golf clubs for £1,000 yesterday. Don't tell the wife. Here you are, try this one. I got a deposit and left as the sun set over Wimbledon Common. Then you know in life, when you get that nagging feeling that you've done something wrong. It suddenly dawned on me that I hadn't charged for a tall larder. I phoned Delboy, but not so funny. He said, well, don't worry about it, Dave. Shit happens. And then, because I realised my mistake would come out of my commission. From the £700 I would have made, I made about £100. But Delboy, not so funny, would get all his cash. Everything was stacked against you. The mileage on the van was clocking up, and I was shelling out for fuel. This all came to a head one Saturday morning when I was sent to Milton Keynes. I arrived there and the husband was on his own. He said his wife was unwell. I made an excuse and went out to my van to make a phone call. I phoned Delboy, but not so funny, and he told me to make an excuse and get out of there. As I've said before, I could have designed the best kitchen ever, but he was always going to go. That's lovely, but I need to talk to my wife. Often people thought you were going to spend 4 hours with them, leave them a beautiful drawn kitchen design and wait for them to call. I never left the design with the customer, especially if they wouldn't commit to buy. Oh, can't you leave your plan? Well, you don't want it. I've told you how much it is, and there's no point. There was people who absolutely had no idea that a fully fitted kitchen cost. Hopefully, you got an idea early in the appointment and that they had no grasp of reality. Anyway, where were we? We were in Milton Keynes, so he wasn't very happy, but I left him and went to my next appointment in North London. Spent the afternoon there, but with no luck. Came home around 7 o'clock. The next day, Sunday, I was sent to Cheltenham for 12 o'clock midday. I watched a couple prepare a full beef roast dinner while I designed a new kitchen, but again, to no avail. I went in the office on Monday for a talk. As I arrived, the assistant manager was leaving. I said, I need a word. Look, I've got to pop home a minute. Come with me and we'll have a talk on the way. We arrived at his house. Now, this might sound a bit snobbish, but it was a council house, very similar to the one I had left in College Peace a few years before. It simply didn't make sense. No one was making a fortune. I told him I'd had enough, and he told me he was off for an interview later that afternoon as well. I said it just doesn't add up. I mean, look at Del Boy, but not so funny, driving around in that horrible beat-up old Rover. So I left. But later that afternoon, I had a furious phone call from Del Boy. He had obviously been told my thoughts word for word. I actually chose to drive an old car. How dare you ever go at me? All right, calm down. I had clearly touched a nerve. I'll have you know that this time next year I'll be a millionaire. Just one blooper this week. Well, one I actually recorded. Tom, the number in the Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, you know what you gotta do. You gotta like it, and you gotta share it.